Hey guys, today I'm going to be sharing my perspectives as a minimalist on Marie Kondo's new show on Netflix called Tidying Up. Now, if you're at all familiar with minimalism or decluttering in general, you've probably heard of some of her books, The Life-Changing Magic of Tidying Up and Spark Joy. And in those books, she really dives into this concept of how she suggests tidying up a home by decluttering it and really keeping only items that spark joy for you, that you can see wanting to move forward with you as you progress through the different stages of your life. As a minimalist, I agree with a ton of what she says, but there are a few things on which we may differ a little bit. So I want to dive into all of those and just share my thoughts, just coming from that minimalist perspective of what I think of her new show, Tidying Up. So let's get right into this. Before we do though, if we don't know each other yet, hi, my name's Ashlynne and I make videos twice a week on this channel about minimalism and intentional living. So if you haven't subscribed yet, definitely consider hitting that red subscribe button down below. But with that being said, let's go ahead and dive into this really fun and interesting topic. Now, I guess beginning with this show just as an overall overview, essentially what she does is goes into people's homes, teaches them her method over the course of about a month, and kind of gives them the lessons that they need to be able to go in and declutter everything themselves, kind of taking that initiative upon themselves. And she goes through her method of decluttering clothing first, and then books, and then paper, and then kimono, which is basically just everything else, and then she kind of finishes off with sentimental items. Now, as a minimalist, I can definitely understand why she's chosen to do clothing first and sentimental items last. You've kind of got a scale of things that tend to be easier for people to declutter and things that are significantly harder for people to declutter. But personally, I feel like books I'd probably leave more to the end, and there are other items like perhaps the kitchen or bathroom things that I would probably declutter closer to the beginning. So for that, I don't particularly agree with every single aspect of like the different phases she goes through, but I do think it's really smart the way that she goes through decluttering by grouping kinds of items together, so like clothing and kitchen items, and kind of the idea of doing that all at one time so that you're able to really just focus on an area at a time. I think that's particularly helpful when you're decluttering, and really I feel like helps you to get a full grasp of what you have and what you need, which from a minimalist perspective is definitely valuable. One thing that I think that this show does particularly well is it really just shows the physical burden and weight that clutter can be on someone's life. You hear couple after family in this show really just expressing how much the amount of things that they have weighs on them, how much it makes cleaning more difficult, how it makes finding things impossible, and how it really just weighs on them, puts stress on their relationships, and really just becomes a real burden. It's also really interesting how throughout the show, several of the individuals, especially one in particular, and I believe the 6th episode, she's just sharing that, as she's going through this process of decluttering, she's coming to this point where she realizes, like, hey, when we first met and fell in love, I had this feeling that we really didn't need a lot to be happy. We just needed each other and our experiences together. And by this process of decluttering, she reignites that love and just realizes that for so many years now, the things in her life have slowly crept into this like place of primary importance, and she kind of just realizes that she needs to realign her perspectives so that she can like focus again on the people, the experiences that are really what she at the end of the day cherishes most. She just kind of lost sight of that for a little bit of time. And for me, that's so much of what minimalism is about. It's about not focusing on your material possessions to the extent where they detract from your relationships with others and your ability to experience life. So I absolutely loved that about the show. On a little bit of a lighter note, I thought it was really interesting how in almost every situation you had one person in the couple who did not want to get rid of their things and kind of prized their possessions a little bit more sentimentally than another person who was willing to get rid of almost everything that they didn't use or love. So I definitely have experienced this in my personal relationships, and I know that a lot of people I've talked to who have gone through a decluttering journey do live with a partner or family members who are not minimalists and who have, whether it's hobbies or collections or whatever, they just have different things in their life that they prize and that they don't want to get rid of, even if they might not use them all the time. And I do like how Marie Kondo approached that kind of situation, where if she could sense that somebody really had a love, a sense of joy over a collection, over something that they truly valued, she was okay with them keeping that and wasn't going to press them to get rid of something that they loved. And I think that's really important. For me, minimalism is all about keeping what you love and what you use, and if you do love something, I don't think that you need to get rid of it. So I really liked the way that she approached that. So one thing that I think that the show might have been able to do a better job of touching on is that it's important, of course, to keep things that you love, but I think there are times also when it's important to keep things that you use as well. There are some items that I feel like in my life I'm pretty neutral about. I don't necessarily love them, I don't dislike them either, they're just kind of in between. But I do use them, and that's why I keep them in my life. And I feel like that's something the show maybe could have touched on a little bit better, is it doesn't necessarily have to spark joy or not spark joy. Like, some items are just kind of neutral, but you use them, and it's for those items that you use that are on that neutral side. I think that's when it's okay to keep something, and just something to keep in mind that, you know, it doesn't necessarily have to, you know, be a huge love in your life to keep it, so long as you're using it frequently. Those are kind of the two measures that I use to decide what I'm going to keep, is do I love it and do I use it? And if it doesn't, you know, match either of those criteria, then obviously I'm not going to keep it in my house. But I think if it, you know, captures one of those two items, then I think it's valuable to keep in your house. And I feel like that's something that wasn't quite touched on as much in the show. Now granted, a lot of these people are coming from having tons and tons of stuff, some of them borderline hoarder levels, and so I don't feel like maybe the conversation was as necessary, but for someone who has already a more minimal amount of stuff in their life, I think it's something valuable just to tuck away at the back of your mind. Sometimes it's good to keep things that you use as well. Maybe you replace them later with something that you love, but you don't need to go out and replace everything in your house just because it doesn't spark joy. And then I think another thing that really hit home for me is that everybody's at a different place in terms of their relationship with their physical things. A lot of the people in the show were honestly borderline hoarders. Some of them literally had like all of their kids' clothes from the day where they were born to like where they were now, and they'd never gotten rid of any of it, which personally like boggles my mind. But I think it's really important, and this kind of taught me and, you know, reminded me that everyone's at a different place. For some of these people, they were just learning how to declutter for the very first time, and so their end result at the end of 30 days, to me, still looks pretty cluttered because I live in a fairly minimal space. But for them, it was a huge amount of progress because they just went from, you know, having tons and tons of stuff in their house, not knowing what to do with any of it, to really going through and beginning that process of evaluating, like, does this spark joy? Does this add value to my life? I think that the important thing to do is really just to not view this as like, okay, I decluttered once and now I'm done. And I think that this is something that the show maybe could expound on in future episodes if they come out with another season. But it's not just about, you know, decluttering once and stopping there. It's about being able to continually evaluate, do these things in my life still spark joy? Because something that might add a tremendous amount of value to your life at one point in time might not in a couple of years. So I think that taking this show as this really interesting perspective into the lives of people who are just beginning their decluttering process is really awesome. I love it from that perspective, but I think that it's really important that we kind of view this as a first step and say, okay, let's not end here. Let's continue to reevaluate. You know, as I see things in my life, is this still adding value? So those are some of my thoughts on, as a minimalist watching this show, what I'm taking away from it, what I learned, and what has kind of refreshed my perspective. I think there's a lot of valuable things to take away from this show. It maybe isn't the most bingeable show in the world, but if you do enjoy a good before and after of a decluttered space, it's definitely a fun one. Or if you're wanting a little bit of information to help you begin to walk through the process of how do I begin to declutter my life, I think that it's a fantastic way to get started. Like I said, I would kind of view it as a first step and take some of her advice with a grain of salt. Maybe you don't want to fold your socks and underwear, or maybe you don't need tons of little storage containers, but apply it to your own life. Figure out what of her advice is going to add value to your life, and really just begin going through that process of considering, do the items in my life spark joy? I hope you guys enjoyed this minimalist perspective of what tidying up, Marie Kondo's newest Netflix show, was like and what kind of are the tidbits I agree with or maybe disagree with, and hopefully you learned something from it as well. If you're interested, definitely go ahead and check out her show on Netflix. I do definitely think that it's worth a watch, especially if you're looking to declutter your home in the near future. That's everything I have for today though. Go ahead and leave a comment below letting me know if you've seen the show, what are your thoughts, or do you plan to watch it? I'd love to know that. Also, if you enjoyed this video and want to see more minimalism and decluttering videos twice a week in your subscription box, go ahead and hit that subscribe button. I'd love to have you join me here, and give this video a thumbs up if you enjoyed it. I know I don't do review videos too often, but if you're interested in seeing more, I can definitely do that. Hope you guys all have a fantastic day today though, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye.